So without further ado, let me open the first panel. Our first panelist is Tomáš Babáček. Tomáš is a leading advisor on environment and sustainability. He is based in Prague. Tomáš has 20 years of experience in advising on development and compliance with complex regulatory requirements and in protection against its undue enforcement by public administration throughout the Central Europe region. Tomáš is specifically focused on waste management and extended producer responsibility, but his team covers other areas, including climate, sustainable finance, disclosure, water management, forestry, and agriculture. Tomáš provides both transactional and strategic advisory to leading market players. Welcome, Tomáš. Thank you very much for joining us.
So again, thank you for introduction and thank you for inviting me to the event. It's my pleasure to be here. And what I'd like to briefly comment in my input here is really the scale and depth of the change that we're witnessing in terms of sustainability and ESG, as you introduced, and how we witness this from Central Europe, because I think every corner of the world can see these changes a bit differently. So what are the specific things that we're witnessing here in Central Europe? So first, this is just a short reminder of the speed that we're seeing, especially in Central Europe. Only 4-5 years ago, we were not discussing sustainability, we're discussing CSR, and in this part of the world, it very often had a form of a charity or at most support in art, support of artists. And so only a few years later, we're talking about ESG and sustainability. So that shows the speed of the change, and it's good to remind at least some of the reasons why we're seeing this transformation to take place. So it can be the acceleration of the climate change itself, or understanding of the climate change, or ability to read data and to agree on reading them. It can be also a huge business opportunities that many companies see in transformation, in investment in more eco-friendly technologies and business cases. It can be, of course, social mobilization and better awareness of a broad public. And it can be a new enforcement role of financial institutions that, of course, use different skill set in enforcing, for example, environmental regulation than environmental inspectorates would do. So these and maybe other reasons, these are some of the reasons why we see such a swift societal and economical transformation impulse. And again, the first Earth Day was celebrated, I believe, in 1970, and simply in Central Europe, we were not celebrating it. Here, we were dealing with other things, and we were not actively, mentally part of this development that is not recent, that is more than 50, 60 years old. And so from Central European perspective, it really seems very, very fast, this change of language, of priorities, and of goals. One of the mimicries of this swift change is the legislation. I can comment it from my perspective, having a background of lawyer. So one of the mimicries is a huge amount of new pieces of legislation that is being adopted these months and years. So this can be one of the overviews of some pieces of the legislation being adopted in the past few months. It is legislation in the area of finance and disclosure, legislation in the area of waste management and circular economy, different pieces of legislation adopted in the area of energy and trade, different pieces of legislation adopted in the pure protection of the environment and biodiversity, but also including agriculture and food. And what we can see on this diagram or scheme is that not only there are many pieces of legislation being adopted these days, but that there are so many of them that we can see a structure in them, and more importantly, that they overlap in the goals that they seek. And we may shortly see that more in detail when we, for example, focus on the finance and disclosure area of legislation. So one of the pieces of legislation that has been recently adopted in the European Union is the taxonomy regulation that primarily seeks to channel private investment into sustainable activities. But at the same time, this regulation widens disclosure obligations of companies. In this case, it applies to big companies, public interest entities with over 500 employees. And it requires them to gradually report on first the eligibility, and then in a second stage in their alignment with sustainability activities as is regulated by the EU taxonomy. So that's one of the pieces of legislation that is recent, that is being still gradually developed, the KPIs that will define what is sustainable and what is not sustainable activity. Another piece of legislation, just shortly to comment, is CSRD, already quite widely discussed even in the Central European region. So this is a piece of legislation that will probably be adopted only in 1 month's time or in a few weeks, aiming firstly to basically widen the disclosure and reporting practice that already has been established to some extent, but it will be much wider. And what we're seeing here is that we are starting to see non-financial information not as something to add to the financial information, but as something that is very much interlinked with the financial information. So not something to be seen apart, and not only acknowledging that, of course, companies have positive and negative impact on their environment, but as something that also has a direct impact on their financial standing, financial performance. So we're seeing a shift in understanding of the importance of non-financial information. And by CSRD, this the reporting on sustainability performance will apply to many more companies. So it will have a standardized form. It will be audited pretty much like financial reports. So quite change in how we perceive in importance of non-financial information and how we use it. And last example of new legislation adopted in this one of many columns of sustainability regulations is SFDR. So this is a regulation that applies primarily to financial sector. It primarily aims to prevent greenwashing. So it requires financial institutions and financial advisors to disclose information on their exposure to sustainable or non-sustainable activities, but at the same time, it requires them to collect information from their counterparties, from their business partners. So on the one hand, this regulation seeks to improve disclosure by the financial institutions and advisors, but it also has a direct effect on the companies that will have to bring the information to the financial institutions and financial advisors. And so what we're seeing here, and again, this is just one of the examples or mimicries of the societal change and regulatory change, is that we see a network of interlinked instruments that are interconnected and that strengthen each other. So in this case, finance and disclosure. So we're seeing gradually more and more companies disclosing information on their sustainable performance, referring to categories by the EU taxonomy. And this information being available not only to their customers, employees, and civil society, but also to the financial sector, which themselves have to report on the products that they're selling, either directly or indirectly referring to sustainable impact of the investment. So different pieces of legislation that strengthen each other, and that by the combination and the global effect actually make a very, very strong push and incentive for companies to rethink their operations. Which brings me to how this is perceived in Central European region. One of the things that I'm continue to hear again and again, is that companies either don't have sufficient information, or that they're swallowed by the information, and it's hard for them to get oriented into what is material, what is important, what is here to stay, and what might be just a momentous mode, and what is important to their operation. So it's not just tons of new pieces of legislation, but tons of other technical information, new operators that are available on the market, helping companies to adjust their operations. So tons of new things that everybody has to get familiar with, and that's one of the obstacles for everyone to, of course, move in this area. One or some other gaps that I'm witnessing or I'm seeing here in Central European region is skill set in cooperation, governance, or leadership. Basically, all the projects that I have been involved in have something to do with an advanced form of cooperation among new types of partners. So any type of solution that we have been ever developing, implementing, is complex one, and it requires specific skill set, cooperation among new types of organizations, setting up advanced governance schemes that the involved parties will not consider as a burden, but as something bringing value to them, because the governance is something that holds the cooperation together. And these are skill sets that I think we're just gradually developing here in Central European region, and sustainability is a great opportunity for us to learn more. This is a learning curve. This is not black and white, but this is a huge opportunity for us to strengthen our skill set in this area, which brings me to just a short comment on the needs that I see in Central Europe, what companies ask for. It is the understanding of the changes, be it in regulation or in technical area, in the business area, new business models. It is capacity building. Most of the companies need to build internal processes, roles, information gathering, evaluation for the purpose of their non-voluntary reporting on their ESG performance. They need to gradually involve this information into their decision-making processes. Simply, persons in organizations that have not been involved in environmental protection or social aspects, all of them are in the stage of learning new things, and it requires time, but the sustainable aspects simply need to get through the whole structure of organizations, and it takes some time, it takes effort, and this is investment that the companies simply have to do right now. So that's the comments I had on ESG.
And thank you, Tomáš, as well, for a very informative presentation.